Hi, my name is Madison Taylor. I'm 26 years old, and this is the story of how I lost everything at 19 because of my sister's lies, and how I rebuilt my life from the ashes. It should have been the happiest summer of my life. I had just finished my sophomore year at Boston University, studying marine biology with a perfect 4.0 GPA. My father, Thomas Taylor, had promised me an internship at Taylor Environmental Solutions, the consulting firm he'd built from nothing into one of New England's most respected companies. But on a humid evening in late June 2019, everything I thought I knew about my family shattered like glass. Before I tell you what happened that night, I want you to do something for me. Drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from, and if you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted completely, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what happens next. Because what I'm about to share will change how you see family forever. I grew up in Newton, Massachusetts, in a colonial-style house that looked like it belonged on a postcard. My father, Thomas, had started Taylor Environmental Solutions in 1995, right after I was born. Within 15 years, he'd grown it into a $50 million company specializing in corporate sustainability consulting. Fortune 500 companies paid him hundreds of thousands of dollars to make their operations look environmentally friendly. He appeared on CNBC, wrote opinion pieces for the Wall Street Journal, and was invited to speak at Yale and MIT. The world saw him as a visionary, a man who had built an empire on principles of environmental responsibility. My mother, Catherine Taylor, came from old Boston money. Her family had been in shipping for generations, the kind of people whose names appeared on hospital wings and museum galleries. She had been raised to believe that appearance was everything, that reputation mattered more than truth. She was elegant, poised, the kind of woman who never left the house without perfect makeup and designer clothes. At charity galas, she sparkled like a jewel, raising money for causes she talked about but never truly understood. And then there was my sister, Ashley. 3 years younger than me, Ashley was everything my parents wanted in a daughter. She was captain of the debate team at Newton North High School, played varsity lacrosse, and had a smile that could convince anyone of anything. While I spent my weekends collecting water samples from Boston Harbor for my research projects, Ashley attended country club events and posed for family photos that made it into the society pages of Boston Magazine. I still remember the exact moment I realized I would never be enough for my parents. I was 12 years old, competing in the Massachusetts State Science Fair. I had spent 6 months studying the effects of microplastics on local marine ecosystems, work that would eventually shape my entire academic career. I won first place, beating out kids from prestigious private schools. I ran home, clutching my trophy, desperate to see pride in my father's eyes. But when I burst through the front door, the house was already filled with celebration. Ashley had been selected to model in a charity fashion show for Children's Hospital. My parents had invited neighbors over, opened champagne, and covered the dining room table with photos of Ashley in designer clothes. My father glanced at my trophy, nodded once, and said, "Good work, Madison. But don't think science projects will ever pay the bills like real business does." My mother didn't even look up from the photos she was arranging. That night, I understood that recognition in the Taylor family would always belong to Ashley, never to me. By the time I reached high school, the pattern was undeniable. Ashley's achievements covered every wall of our home, from her debate trophies to her acceptance letter to Harvard. My accomplishments, my straight A's, my research published in a student journal, my volunteer work teaching marine science to inner-city kids, were tucked away in drawers, never displayed, never celebrated. I'll never forget my high school graduation in 2017. I had been accepted to Boston University's prestigious marine biology program with a full academic scholarship. I was valedictorian. But at the graduation dinner my parents hosted, every toast was about Ashley's upcoming senior year, about her bright future at Harvard. When I tried to talk about my research plans, my father cut me off. "Madison, you need to understand something. Marine biology is a hobby. When you graduate, you'll join the company and do real environmental work, corporate consulting. That's where the money is. I told him again and again that I wanted to study ocean acidification, that I wanted to work on climate change research. He dismissed it with a wave of his hand. That's for people who write grant proposals and beg for funding. You need to contribute to this family's legacy. When I insisted on pursuing my degree at BU instead of switching to business school, he threatened to cut me off financially. It was only because of my scholarship and later student loans that I managed to stay in school. My grandmother, Eleanor Taylor, was the only light in those dark years. While my parents dismissed my dreams, she was the one who truly saw me. Grandma Eleanor had been a pioneering oceanographer in the 1960s, one of the first women to join research expeditions in the North Atlantic. She had published groundbreaking work on fish migration patterns, research that later helped establish marine protection zones. But her name appeared nowhere in my father's company materials, nowhere in the family history he told at dinner parties. One afternoon when I was 16, she took me to her study and opened an old filing cabinet. Inside were decades of research notes, photographs of her on research vessels, letters from colleagues praising her discoveries. "Your father used my research to launch this company," she told me, her voice carrying both pride and sadness. "He took my work on sustainable fishing practices and turned it into consulting packages for corporations. But he never acknowledged where it came from, Madison. Because I was a woman, and because the world wasn't ready to believe women could be serious scientists." My heart broke hearing that. "Do you regret it?" I asked. She looked at me with fierce determination in her eyes. "Never. Because science isn't about getting credit, it's about discovering truth. But I do regret letting others define my worth. Don't make the same mistake, Madison. If they try to force you into a box, break free." What my parents didn't know until that terrible summer of 2019 was that Grandma Eleanor had prepared a secret gift for me. She had quietly established a trust fund worth $3 million in my name, money she had earned from her research royalties and wise investments over the decades. The conditions were clear: the money would only be released when I graduated from college or turned 25, whichever came first. It wasn't just an inheritance. It was my ticket to freedom, my chance to pursue real research without depending on my father's company. I learned about it when I was 17, just before she passed away from cancer. She called me to her hospital bed, held my trembling hand, her eyes clouded with morphine but still sharp with love. "Madison," she whispered, "I won't let you spend your life trapped like I was. Promise me, no matter what happens, you'll follow your own path. Don't let anyone buy you off or control you." I promised through my tears. 3 weeks later, she was gone. My parents knew nothing about the trust until May 2019, during a routine meeting with the family's estate attorney. Someone mentioned a special account managed by independent trustees, assuming my parents were already aware. In that instant, I watched my father's face turn white and my mother's eyes go cold as ice. They said nothing to me that day, but I knew something had shifted. From that moment on, the way they looked at me changed completely. It wasn't just disappointment anymore. It was calculation. They realized that if I got that inheritance, I would be completely independent. I wouldn't need their money. I wouldn't need to join the company. And I might even have the power to expose the truth I had discovered about Taylor Environmental Solutions. Because during my sophomore year research project, I had uncovered something that would destroy everything my father had built. It started innocently enough. I had joined a marine research team studying pollution levels in Massachusetts Bay, focusing on areas near industrial zones. Our project site included waters near several manufacturing facilities, including one that had recently been cited for environmental violations. We were collecting water samples, testing for heavy metals, checking pH levels, standard research protocols. But in the samples I collected near Quincy, The results were alarming. Mercury and lead levels were 3 times higher than EPA safety standards. Even more disturbing, I found traces of industrial solvents and chemical compounds that shouldn't have been in seawater at all. When I showed the data to my research professor, Dr. James Chin, he frowned. These readings are consistent with illegal dumping. Someone's disposing of industrial waste directly into the bay. My hands shook as I looked at the map. The current patterns led directly back to a facility with a familiar name on the permits: Taylor Environmental Solutions, Quincy Operations Center. My own father's company was dumping toxic waste into the ocean. Over the next 3 weeks, I quietly collected more samples. Every test confirmed it. The pollution was systematic, ongoing, and it was coming from my father's facility. I started digging through public records, cross-referencing discharge permits with actual water quality data. The permits claimed the facility was treating wastewater properly before release, but my samples proved otherwise. I found chemical signatures that matched specific industrial processes, compounds I recognized from reading about the company's consulting work with manufacturing clients. They weren't just advising companies on environmental compliance. They were helping them dispose of waste illegally, charging premium fees, and pocketing the difference between proper treatment and cheap dumping. One night in early June 2019, I sat in my dorm room staring at the evidence I had compiled. Water samples. Photographs. Chemical analysis reports. Maps showing pollution patterns. Every piece of data pointed to one conclusion: Taylor Environmental Solutions, the company that made millions preaching environmental responsibility, was poisoning the ocean for profit. I knew if I stayed silent, the damage would continue. Fish populations would decline. People who ate seafood from contaminated waters would get sick. The ecosystem my grandmother had spent her life protecting would be destroyed by her own son's greed. I decided to confront my father. If you're still watching, leave a comment letting me know if you think I made the right choice. And make sure you're subscribed, because what happens next will blow your mind. On June 15, 2019, I drove home to Newton for what I thought would be a family dinner. I brought my evidence in a folder, my hands sweating as I carried it into the house. My father was in his study, reviewing quarterly reports. My mother was arranging flowers in the dining room. Ashley was upstairs, preparing for her Harvard orientation. I walked into my father's study and spread the test results across his mahogany desk. I know what the company is doing, I said, my voice shaking but determined. I have evidence of illegal dumping. Chemical analysis. Photographic documentation. If you don't stop immediately and report this to the EPA, I will. The silence that followed was suffocating. My father slowly set down his pen, his eyes moving from the papers to my face. His expression was unreadable, but I saw his jaw tighten. My mother appeared in the doorway, drawn by the tension. You don't understand what you're looking at, my father said finally, his voice dangerously quiet. This is complex business, Madison. There are things you can't possibly comprehend. I understand chemistry, I shot back. I understand that you're dumping untreated industrial waste into Massachusetts Bay. I understand that you're violating federal environmental law. And I understand that this is exactly the kind of thing that send executives to prison. My mother's face went pale. Madison, think about what you're saying. Think about this family. Think about everything your father has built. I'm thinking about Grandma Eleanor, I said, tears stinging my eyes. I'm thinking about the ocean she spent her life protecting. I'm thinking about the truth. My father stood up, his face flushed with rage. The truth? You want to talk about truth? That trust fund you're so eager to get, that $3 million from your grandmother, do you think you'll see a penny of it if you destroy this family? Do you think any of this matters compared to our reputation? That was when I understood. This wasn't about right or wrong to them. It was about control. About maintaining the perfect image. About protecting their empire at any cost. I'm giving you 1 week, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. Either you report the violations and begin proper cleanup, or I take this evidence to the authorities myself. I walked out of that study knowing I had just declared war on my own family. For 3 days, nothing happened. My parents didn't call. Ashley sent me one text, "Mom and Dad are really upset." What did you do? Then on June 18, 2019, everything exploded. I was in my apartment near BU when my phone started ringing. First it was my father's lawyer. Then my academic advisor. Then Dr. Chin, my research professor, his voice tight with confusion and anger. "Madison, I need you to come to my office immediately. There are very serious allegations that have been made against you." I drove to campus with my stomach in knots. When I arrived, Dr. Chin was waiting with the department chair, Dr. Patricia Rodriguez, and someone from the university's Office of Student Conduct. "Madison," Dr. Rodriguez said, her voice formal and cold, "we've received a complaint alleging that you fabricated research data. Specifically, the water quality samples from your Massachusetts Bay project." My blood turned to ice. What? No. That's impossible. I have all my original samples, all my notes, everything is documented. We also have a statement, Dr. Chin interrupted, looking uncomfortable, from someone who claims they witnessed you manipulating sample containers and falsifying collection dates. Who? I demanded. Who said that? Dr. Rodriguez slid a paper across the desk. At the bottom was a signature I recognized immediately. Ashley Taylor. My own sister. The document claimed Ashley had visited me at my apartment in May and witnessed me tampering with sample containers and adding chemicals to water samples to artificially elevate pollution readings. It alleged I was fabricating data to damage my father's company out of resentment and jealousy. Every word was a lie. Ashley had visited me exactly once that semester, stayed for 20 minutes, and left. She had never seen my research materials. She knew nothing about my work. But her statement was notarized, detailed, and convincing. "This is bullshit," I said, my voice cracking. "She's lying. My father put her up to this because I found evidence of illegal dumping." "Madison," Dr. Rodriguez cut me off, "these are very serious accusations you're making. Accusing your own family of conspiracy." "Because it's true," I shouted. "I have the evidence. I have the samples. Test them yourself. Call the EPA. But don't you dare tell me I fabricated research when I didn't." But it was too late. The wheels were already in motion. Within 48 hours, Boston University launched a formal academic integrity investigation. My research project was suspended. My access to the marine lab was revoked. And worst of all, rumors started spreading through the department that I had faked data to attack my own father's company. Then came the call from home. My father's voice was cold and final. "Madison, you've made your choice. You've chosen to attack this family, to spread lies and damage our reputation. As of today, you are no longer part of the Taylor family. Don't call. Don't come home. And don't expect a penny of support from us." "What about the trust fund?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "We've filed a legal challenge. Given your fraudulent behavior, we're arguing you're not fit to receive it. Our lawyers say we have a strong case." The line went dead. In the span of 72 hours, I lost everything. My family disowned me. My academic career was in ruins. My credibility was destroyed. And the inheritance that was supposed to guarantee my independence was tied up in legal challenges I couldn't afford to fight. I was 19 years old, alone, and everyone believed my sister's lies instead of my truth. If you've made it this far, please hit subscribe and leave a comment. Because this story is far from over, and what happens next will restore your faith in justice. The months that followed were the darkest of my life. Boston University's investigation dragged on through the summer of 2019, each day feeling like a lifetime. Without access to the marine lab, I couldn't continue my research. Without my family's support, I struggled to pay rent even with my scholarship covering tuition. The trust fund that was supposed to be my safety net was locked away in legal battles I couldn't afford to fight. I took a job waiting tables at Legal Seafoods in Cambridge, working double shifts 6 days a week just to cover my bills. My hands would shake as I carried trays of lobster and oysters, the same seafood that might have been contaminated by my father's illegal dumping. The irony wasn't lost on me. I would come home at midnight, smelling of fish and fryer grease, too exhausted to even cry. The rumors followed me everywhere like a toxic cloud. Other students whispered when I walked into class. I would hear fragments of conversations. That's her, the one who made up data to attack her own dad. I heard she's mentally unstable. Daddy issues, probably. Professors who had once encouraged my research and praised my meticulous methodology now avoided eye contact in the hallways. I was the girl who had fabricated data, who had tried to destroy her own father's company out of spite and jealousy. My phone stayed silent. Friends from high school stopped responding to texts. People I had studied with for 2 years suddenly had excuses when I suggested meeting for coffee. I had become radioactive, someone to avoid for fear of being associated with scandal. The isolation was suffocating. There were nights I sat alone in my apartment, staring at my phone, scrolling through old photos of family gatherings, trying to understand how everything had fallen apart so completely. I would see pictures of Ashley and me as children, building sandcastles on Cape Cod, and wonder when exactly she had learned to lie so convincingly. Only 2 people stood by me, my roommate Jessica Martinez and Dr. Chin. Jessica was a psychology major from El Paso, Texas, someone who understood what it meant to fight against family expectations. She had left home to pursue her education against her parents' wishes, and she recognized the courage it took to stand alone. On the worst nights, when I couldn't stop crying, when the weight of everything felt impossible to bear, Jessica would sit with me and say, "You did the right thing. History will prove it." Dr. Chin, despite the investigation and pressure from the university administration to distance himself from the scandal, privately told me something that gave me hope. "Madison," he said one afternoon in his office, speaking in barely more than a whisper, "I've reviewed your methodology line by line. Your sample collection protocols were textbook perfect. Your chain of custody documentation was meticulous. Your chemical analysis was sound. Something about this doesn't add up, and I want you to know I believe you." Those words sustained me through some of the darkest moments. When everyone else had written me off as a fraud, one person who understood the science believed in my integrity. But belief wasn't enough to stop the investigation. Through July and August of 2019, I was called into meeting after meeting with university officials. They questioned every aspect of my research. Where had I collected samples? What time of day? What weather conditions? Had I used proper sterilization techniques? Had anyone witnessed my collection procedures? The questions felt designed not to find truth but to find inconsistencies they could use to discredit me. Ashley's statement hung over everything like a guillotine. She claimed she had visited my apartment in May and seen me adding chemicals to sample containers. She described my lab setup in detail, the rows of glass bottles, the labeling system, even the color of the markers I used. Her description was accurate because she had visited once, briefly, but everything about her witnessing fabrication was a lie. Yet her statement was notarized. It was detailed. It was believable. And when university investigators contacted her for follow-up questions, she stuck to her story perfectly, crying on cue, expressing her heartbreak at having to expose her sister's fraud. I tried to defend myself. I provided my lab notebooks, showing every sample collection logged with GPS coordinates, timestamps, and weather conditions. I provided photos I had taken at each collection site. I provided the chain of custody documents. But they kept coming back to one question: if your sister is lying, why would she do this? What motive would she have? I wanted to scream the truth, because our father told her to, because our family was protecting a multi-million-dollar criminal enterprise, because they would sacrifice me to save themselves. But without proof, it just sounded like paranoid conspiracy theory. In August 2019, the university concluded its investigation. They found insufficient evidence of intentional fraud but noted serious questions about research protocols and potential conflicts of interest. It was academic language for, "We can't prove you lied, but we don't entirely believe you either." The statement went on to say that given the controversial nature of the research target and family complications, it would be inappropriate to continue the project. My research project was officially terminated. The samples I had collected, stored carefully in the marine lab's freezers, were disposed of as potentially compromised. All my work, 6 months of meticulous documentation, hundreds of hours of analysis, was erased as if it had never existed. The day I received that letter, I sat in my apartment and felt something inside me break. Not just my heart, though that was shattered too. Something deeper, something fundamental about my faith in justice and truth. I had done everything right. I had followed proper scientific protocols. I had documented everything. And it hadn't mattered. Ashley's lies had been more powerful than my truth. I fell into a depression that lasted weeks. I stopped attending my summer classes. I barely ate, surviving on whatever leftover food I could take home from the restaurant. I would stare at the walls for hours, unable to articulate the pain of being betrayed so completely by the people who were supposed to love me most. Jessica would find me like that, silent tears streaming down my face, and she would sit beside me without saying anything, just being present in my grief. There were moments I considered giving up entirely. Moments I thought about dropping out of school, leaving Boston, starting over somewhere no one knew my name or my story. Moments I wondered if fighting for the truth was worth losing everything. But then I would remember my grandmother. I would remember sitting in her study, listening to her stories of being dismissed and erased despite her brilliant work. I would remember her fierce determination, her insistence that truth mattered more than recognition. And I would think, if I give up now, her sacrifice was for nothing. If I let them win, I become complicit in the lie. So I kept going. I dragged myself to work. I forced myself to attend classes. I maintained my perfect GPA even though every day felt like drowning. I was surviving, but barely. I fell into a depression that lasted weeks. I stopped going to classes. I barely ate. Jessica would find me staring at the wall, tears streaming down my face, unable to articulate the pain of being betrayed so completely. But in late September 2019, something changed. I received an anonymous email. The sender address was just random letters and numbers, but the message was clear. You were right about Taylor Environmental Solutions. I worked there. I have proof. Meet me. My hands shook as I read it. Someone else knew the truth. 2 days later, I met the sender at a coffee shop in Somerville. He was a man in his 50s, gray-haired, nervous, constantly looking over his shoulder. His name was Robert Chin, and he had been a senior environmental compliance officer at Taylor Environmental Solutions for 12 years. I quit 3 weeks ago, he told me in a low voice. I couldn't keep lying anymore. Your father's company doesn't just consult on environmental compliance. They help manufacturers bypass regulations. They facilitate illegal dumping, forge permits, falsify reports. I have documentation of everything. He slid a flash drive across the table. Internal emails. Falsified discharge reports. Photos of illegal dumping operations. Bank records showing payments to EPA inspectors to look the other way. Everything. Why are you giving this to me? I asked. Because when I heard what they did to you, I realized how far they would go to protect themselves. You were a kid. You were just trying to do the right thing. And they destroyed you for it. I took the flash drive with trembling hands. What do you want me to do with this? What you should have done from the start. Don't go to your father. Go straight to the federal authorities. The EPA. The FBI. Make it impossible for them to bury it. That night, I copied the files 3 times. One copy went to a secure cloud storage. One went to Jessica with instructions to release it if anything happened to me. And one stayed with me. The next morning, October 3, 2019, I walked into the EPA's Boston office and requested to speak with a special investigations agent. Over the next 8 months, everything changed in ways I could never have imagined. The EPA launched a full investigation into Taylor Environmental Solutions, deploying teams of environmental scientists and investigators to Massachusetts Bay. They conducted their own water quality tests at multiple sites, including the exact locations where I had collected my samples. Every test confirmed my original findings: mercury levels 3 times the federal limit, lead concentrations dangerous to marine life, industrial solvents that should never have been in seawater. They reviewed Robert Chen's documents with forensic accountants and environmental law specialists, finding evidence of systematic environmental crimes dating back over 8 years. The illegal dumping wasn't occasional or accidental. It was a deliberate business model. Taylor Environmental Solutions would contract with manufacturing companies, promising to handle their waste disposal at rates far below legitimate treatment costs. Then they would simply dump it into the ocean, pocketing the difference between what they charged and what proper treatment would have cost. The scheme had generated over $30 million in illegal profits. In March 2020, just as the COVID-19 pandemic was starting to shut down the country, federal agents in hazmat suits and FBI windbreakers raided Taylor Environmental Solutions headquarters in downtown Boston. I watched it happen on the evening news from my apartment, my hands shaking as I held the remote. They seized computers, file cabinets full of documents, financial records going back a decade. Photos of agents carrying boxes out of my father's pristine glass and steel offices appeared on every local news channel. The company's stock, which had been publicly traded on NASDAQ, plummeted. Within 48 hours, Taylor Environmental Solutions had lost 87% of its market value. Major clients terminated their contracts. The Massachusetts Attorney General announced a separate state investigation into fraud and racketeering. My phone exploded with messages. Journalists wanted interviews. Former classmates who had shunned me suddenly wanted to reconnect. People I hadn't heard from in months sent apologies. I'm so sorry I didn't believe you. The vindication felt hollow. Where were these people when I needed support? The FBI got involved when they discovered evidence of bribery and conspiracy in the seized documents. Emails showed my father had paid off local EPA inspectors to file false reports. Bank records showed offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands used to hide profits from illegal dumping contracts. There were text messages between my father and Ashley, proving he had coached her on exactly what to say in her false statement against me. One text from my father to Ashley, dated June 16, 2019, made me physically ill when prosecutors showed it to me. Just sign the statement exactly as written. Don't add anything, don't change anything. Madison thinks she's smarter than everyone, but family always wins. Once her credibility is destroyed, this all goes away. Ashley's response: I'm scared. What if I get in trouble? My father: you won't. You're a minor, and you're protecting your family. That's what good daughters do. Reading those messages, I understood how thoroughly he had manipulated her. She was 17, desperate for his approval, terrified of losing everything. He had weaponized her love and loyalty against me. And Ashley's statement, the lie that had destroyed my academic career and my reputation, became evidence of witness tampering and obstruction of justice in a federal investigation. In June 2020, federal prosecutors announced indictments at a press conference covered by national media. Thomas Taylor was charged with 12 counts including conspiracy to violate the Clean Water Act, bribery of public officials, wire fraud, and witness tampering. Catherine Taylor was charged with conspiracy and acting as an accessory after the fact. And Ashley, my sister, was charged with making false statements to a federal investigation and obstruction of justice. The assistant U.S. attorney prosecuting the case was a woman named Sarah Kim, a former environmental lawyer who had built her career fighting corporate pollution. She called me to her office in the federal courthouse and said, "Madison, I want you to know something. What you did, standing up to your own family to expose environmental crimes, took incredible courage. But what they did to you in response, trying to destroy your credibility and your future, that's what's going to put them in prison." The trial began in February 2021, conducted under strict COVID protocols with masked witnesses and socially distanced seating. I sat in the courtroom every single day of the 3-week trial, wearing the same navy blazer my grandmother had given me for my college interviews. I wanted my father to see me, to know I hadn't been destroyed, to understand that truth eventually prevails. Robert Chin testified first, his voice steady despite obvious nervousness. He walked the jury through internal company documents showing how the illegal dumping scheme worked. He explained how they would create 2 sets of records, one showing proper waste treatment for regulatory inspections, another showing the actual dumping for internal accounting. EPA scientists testified next, presenting water quality data, maps showing pollution patterns, chemical analyses proving the contamination came from industrial sources. They explained in scientific detail how the compounds I had identified in my original research matched the waste streams from Taylor Environmental Solutions client companies. FBI agents presented emails where my father explicitly discussed the Madison problem and strategies for neutralizing her credibility. They showed bank records proving payments to corrupt EPA inspectors. They traced millions of dollars through offshore shell companies. Throughout all of it, my father sat at the defense table looking arrogant and unbothered, as if this were all beneath him. My mother cried periodically, dabbing her eyes with a designer handkerchief. Their lawyers, expensive white shoe firm attorneys from New York, tried every strategy, attacking the credibility of witnesses, claiming improper search warrants, arguing the science was flawed. None of it worked. The evidence was overwhelming. When Ashley took the stand, everything changed. She walked to the witness box looking pale and terrified, 20 pounds thinner than I remembered, dark circles under her eyes. The prosecutor asked her to explain the statement she had signed against me. Ashley's voice shook as she answered. "Dad told me Madison was trying to destroy the family. He said she had fabricated research because she was jealous of me, because she hated him, because she wanted to steal the company. He showed me a statement he had written and told me to sign it. He said if I didn't, we would lose everything, our house, our future, everything." "How old were you at the time?" the prosecutor asked gently. 17. I was about to start at Harvard. I was scared. Did you actually witness Madison tampering with research samples? Ashley's face crumpled. No. I visited her apartment once that semester. I saw her lab set up, but I never saw her doing anything wrong. The detailed descriptions in the statement came from Dad. He told me exactly what to write. She turned toward me, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry, Madison. I'm so sorry. I was wrong. I was a coward. I chose Dad's approval over the truth, and I destroyed you. There's no excuse for what I did." I sat frozen, unable to process the apology I had waited 2 years to hear. Part of me wanted to feel vindicated. Part of me just felt sad for both of us, 2 daughters damaged by a father who saw us as tools, not people. The defense tried to discredit Ashley, suggesting she was lying now to get a better plea deal. But her testimony was corroborated by the text messages, by Robert Chen's testimony, by the timeline of events. The jury could see the truth. She had been manipulated by our father into committing a crime. I felt no satisfaction watching her cry. Only sadness for how thoroughly our father had corrupted both of us. The jury deliberated for 3 days. On March 15, 2021, they returned with their verdict, guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced my father to 15 years in federal prison. My mother received 5 years for her role in the conspiracy. And Ashley, because of her age and cooperation with investigators, received 2 years of probation and community service. Taylor Environmental Solutions was dissolved. All assets were seized to pay for environmental cleanup costs and restitution to affected communities. And the trust fund challenge was dismissed. The court ruled that not only was I entitled to the original $3 million, but I was also awarded additional damages for the harm done to my reputation and career. I was 22 years old when the verdict came in. I had spent 3 years fighting, struggling, being called a liar and a fraud. But I had won. Standing outside the courthouse that March day, reporters shoving microphones in my face, I made a statement. This was never about revenge. It was about truth. My grandmother taught me that science isn't about personal glory. It's about protecting the planet for future generations. I hope everyone watching understands that when you speak truth to power, even if it costs you everything, eventually justice will prevail. The years since have been transformative. Boston University formally apologized and reinstated my research with full honors. I graduated in 2022 with my degree in marine biology, magna cum laude. Dr. Chen became my thesis advisor, and my work on detecting illegal ocean dumping through chemical analysis was published in a prestigious environmental science journal. I used part of the trust fund to establish the Eleanor Taylor Foundation for Ocean Conservation, named after my grandmother. The foundation funds research by young scientists, particularly women in marine biology, and provides legal support for whistleblowers in environmental cases. Ashley and I have slowly, carefully, rebuilt our relationship. She transferred from Harvard to UMass Boston and is now studying social work, focusing on helping families recover from domestic abuse and manipulation. We meet for coffee once a month. The trust isn't fully restored, but we're both trying. Last summer, I started working as a research scientist with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. I spend my days studying the same waters my grandmother once explored, continuing the work she started 6 decades ago. I've been invited to speak at conferences about environmental justice and corporate accountability. Just last month, I stood on a stage at MIT, addressing a room full of scientists and activists. I was 19 when I lost everything, I told them. My family disowned me. My sister lied about me. My career seemed finished before it had even started. People ask me if I regret it, if I wish I had just kept quiet and taken the easy path. I paused, looking out at the faces watching me. The answer is no. Because silence isn't neutrality. Silence is complicity. When you know the truth and you say nothing, you become part of the problem. My grandmother taught me that real courage isn't about being fearless. It's about being terrified and doing the right thing anyway. The applause that followed was thunderous. I don't live in the colonial house in Newton anymore. That house, that symbol of the perfect family, was sold to pay legal fees. Instead, I have a small apartment in Woods Hole, Massachusetts, right on the water. Every morning I wake up to the sound of waves, to the smell of salt air, to the knowledge that I'm doing work that matters. Sometimes I think about my father in federal prison, about my mother serving her sentence, about the empire they built and lost. I don't feel triumphant about their downfall. I feel sad for the family we could have been if they had chosen truth over image, love over control. But I also feel free. Free from the weight of their expectations. Free from the need to prove my worth to people who would never see it. Free to build a life based on my values, not theirs. Ashley visits sometimes. Last week she came to Woods Hole, and we took a research boat out into the bay. As we collected water samples together, she said quietly, "I'm sorry for what I did. I know I can never fully make it right." I looked at my sister, at the genuine remorse in her eyes, and I realized something important. Forgiveness isn't about erasing the past. It's about choosing not to let it define your future. "You were a kid being manipulated by Dad," I told her. "I understand that now. What matters is who you choose to be from here forward." She nodded, tears in her eyes, and we worked together in silence, two sisters trying to heal. My story doesn't end with perfect closure, because real life rarely does. But it ends with something more valuable: peace. The peace of knowing I stood up for what was right. The peace of honoring my grandmother's legacy. The peace of building a life that reflects my values, not someone else's expectations. If you're watching this and you've ever been told to stay silent, to protect the family, to not rock the boat, I want you to hear this. Your truth matters more than their comfort. Your integrity is more valuable than their approval. And sometimes the people who love you least deserve your loyalty most are the ones who demand it loudest. Blood doesn't equal love. Real family is built by people who respect you, support you, and stand by you even when it's hard. Sometimes that's the family you're born into. And sometimes it's the family you build yourself. Before I go, I want to ask you one more time, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Drop a comment telling me your thoughts on this story. Have you ever had to choose between loyalty and truth? What would you have done in my situation? I read every comment, and your support means everything to me. I'm Madison Taylor, and this was my story of losing everything at 19 because of my sister's lies, and finding everything that truly mattered along the way. The truth is the strongest antidote to any poison, family or otherwise. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And thank you for believing that one person speaking the truth can actually make a difference.